A very warm welcome to all of you. And I can see by the number of people that we have attending that this is really a very interesting topic. And we're so delighted to have both Emma and Mark with us as they're going to present this evening to us. Um, Emma is a music therapist and she has also got a background in psychology and mental health care. And Mark is a psychiatrist. And so over to both of you. We all really looking forward to this.
Thank you, Janine. So I'm Marc Roffey, psychiatrist and amateur musician, and very gratified to see the response and the number of people. And um, Emma and I have enjoyed putting this talk together, but we've realised that there's a lot of material, so we've tried hard just to make it interesting and relevant. But there's a lot more that can be said about this. But anyway, Emma, do you want to say hi?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm so excited to be sharing this talk and co-facilitating with Mark. As Janine said, I am a music therapist, um, and yeah, just really excited to chat more about this topic with everyone.
Yeah, and good to see people, um, old friends from my training cohort, and new people, and also people from inside EMISA and outside EMISA too. Um, so I'm just going to share the screen, and we are sharing a lot of audio files, and we just hope that this all works. Um, so we've titled this talk Listening into Presence. And I'm going to start with just to get us into the spirit of things, just a short experiential practice, listening to a piece of piano music. Um, and for the first segment of it, I just want you to think about the music. So bring thinking awareness to the music. If you're versed in music in any way, wondering and thinking, is it perhaps contemporary music? Is it classical music? If it is classical music, which period might it belong to or might it come from? Could it be film music? Could it be some other sort of incidental music? Any technical aspects of the performance might come to mind or come to light. Any thoughts about the playing? Is it convincingly played? How is the sound quality, etc. Right, so here we go. So with all of those instructions in mind, here is the first piece of music. Okay, the slide is not advancing. There we go. Before I carry on, can everybody hear that? Okay, good. Okay, now the invitation is to approach listening to the music in a different way when the same piece of music resumes. So if it feels comfortable, closing your eyes or softening your gaze, perhaps changing your posture in order to receive the music in a different way, and moving from a head space or a head awareness to a more somatic awareness. And perhaps to facilitate this, we can allow attention to drop to the soles of the feet for a second, and then taking in sensations of sitting on the chair, perhaps feeling your back on the backrest of the chair, and just taking a couple of slow, deep breaths. And now when you listen to the music, noticing any body sensations which might arise in this listening, and any emotions. And if thoughts arise, simply acknowledging them and then bringing attention back to sensations and feelings. Okay, now it would be lovely to hear from people how the difference between those two types of listening was for any of you. You can maybe just pop something in the chat, or if you want to raise a real or virtual hand and actually say something, that would be great. Anybody want to share their experience of that? Or just pop something in the chat.
Yeah, I think from my side, Mark, the feeling was of like almost imagining being part of the music, and sort of the fast and the slow, and getting a sense of fun in it.
Sense of fun. Okay, thank you, Ian. So a sense of enjoyment, and I see that Jenny has also said first one felt more pleasant. The first one reminded Nordland, the first one reminded me of autumn, second was an integration of the music with the senses. Great. Mariam says, I realize I cannot not listen to music somatically. It's a lovely piece of music, uplifting. Second, when listening with the heart, it was more soothing and I judged it less. Anna Law. Chiara, music was felt, not just heard the second time round. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody, for those. Emma, do you want to say something about the purpose and the intention of the forum now that we've just sort of introduced everybody to an experience of sound?
Yes. So Mark and I have been chatting for months about this topic of the meeting point between music and mindfulness. We are both musicians who practice mindfulness and both see the potential in integrating the two. And this learning forum will explore this intersection. And we just want to get feedback and people's thoughts about this thing that we find so intuitively, that they share so many similarities and can be used to promote one another. So we're going to reflect on music as a structured and relational medium and how it can support present moment awareness and emotional integration.
Thank you, Emma. So I just want to give you a brief overview of the flow of this session. I'll be starting off by talking a little bit about what music actually is. Then Emma will, as a music therapist, will talk about music therapy. And then I'll talk about why mindfulness and music, and that's really what this discussion is about, or this learning forum, and what a mindfulness and music intervention might look like. We'll then have a more intensive listening practice with some discussion around that in small breakout rooms before opening up to just a general discussion about the evening and answering questions and so on. Right, so I can see my screen again. It disappeared for a minute. That's great. So let me advance this and we talk about taking a while to move on to the next slide. Let's try something else. Okay, sorry, it's not moving. We're just being patient and seeing what's happening. Should I try, Janine, maybe stopping sharing and then resharing? Yes. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, we seem to be stuck on slide 2. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so I just wanted to say a little bit about myself before I get my interest in music. So I'm an amateur musician. I enjoy writing music in particular, but I've had very definite encounters with the inner critic in various ways. And this has led to experiencing music performance anxiety, which is an actual entity, and we'll look at that a bit later, MPA, which can be felt quite somatically and cognitively during performance. So I've tried to bring mindfulness to this in terms of deliberately bringing mindfulness practice to grounding during performance, noticing, bringing somatic awareness to performing, bringing a lot of self-kindness, self-compassion to practicing music and just generally approaching music. And that's really where my interest in mindfulness and music started. But it's also very apparent to me that there's a lot of conceptual overlaps between the two disciplines, which we'll look at a little bit later. Anyway, but let's start with the obvious. What is music? Is it perhaps just organized sound, which is a very basic definition of it? Yes, it might be, but then any sound in the environment which is organized, like raindrops, could be considered music. So conventionally, we sort of break down music as we understand it into three essential building blocks: melody, harmony, and rhythm. There are others, but those are the basic three, which we will be looking at in a minute with some demonstrations. It's also a communication in aesthetic rather than propositional language, because music is always communicating something, usually something emotional, as people realized with that first listening piece. And moreover, it's something which engages virtually the entire brain and body. I'm very fond of telling people, particularly parents of young children, that they should send their kids to music for music lessons, because the brain lights up like a Christmas tree when one is playing music, and we'll look at that a bit later with the neuroscience of music. But if I can just ask all of you, because all of you are here presumably because you have a relationship with music in some way, to just take a few seconds to think about a favorite piece of music. Just think of something that you're particularly fond of, a piece of music that you're particularly fond of. And now if you were to describe that, there'd be quite a lot of, it would be a lot more difficult than if I'd said to you, for example, think of your favorite photograph or image or painting, because that is a very clear visual thing. But when you think about a favorite piece of music, it could be the name of the music, so there could be a visual aspect, there could be an auditory aspect, you could hear something of the music, but which part would it be? The beginning, the middle, the end? There might be a whole lot of very strong memories and associations and emotions surrounding your memory or your recollection of that favorite piece of music, which just illustrates really that music has this intriguing, intangible, elusive, indeterminate quality. But I do want to make the point with this next slide. Okay, now I see the slides are working nicely, that's good. Slide, excuse me, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. It's making the point that music is an innate human ability. It's not something that we learn or that some people have and other people don't have. It seems to be innate, and some very clever paleontologists and evolutionary theorists and musicologists have looked at our lineage as human beings and realized that probably as long as 200,000 years ago, our hominid ancestors communicated musically before they could communicate with language, or at least the two together seem to have arisen. But there's a very strong argument for saying that some sort of musicality preceded language. And Stephen Mithen wrote a wonderful book called The Singing Neanderthals in 2007, and his ideas are still very influential. And he described early hominid communication with this italicization, an H followed by 5 M's. And if you just look at the bottom of the slide, this early musicality in humans is analogous to the vocalizations, gestures, and body postures used by non-human primates today. So they're holistic, conveying information and also emotional expression and social interaction. They're manipulative, meaning that they manipulate information and meaning, and they're functional. They're multimodal, so they don't just involve the voice, but all parts of the body. They are musical in nature, and they are mimetic, meaning that they can be imitated or copied by different members of the community. And this is likely how communication about ourselves and our environment arose in early human beings, and then it evolved into language. So I just want to read this to you to strengthen that argument that the current consensus is that while specialized neural networks exist for processing language and music, abilities in these areas draws on both networks, and neither has a cognitive superiority over the other. Neuroimaging studies, as well as case studies of people who have suffered brain lesions or been born with congenital constraints of either their music or linguistic ability, would seem to support this view. In other words, our musical ability does not seem to simply be a spin-off from language or other cognitive abilities, as some, notably psychologist Steven Pinker, suggest. Steven Pinker is a very influential psychologist who famously or notoriously, whatever your point of view is, dismissed music as auditory cheesecake, meaning it was just this useless byproduct of our brains. So the
I had this particular.
So the next slide is showing, it's quite an entertaining demonstration of this by a music psychologist called Diana Deutsch, and this will demonstrate the link, hopefully, between music and language very clearly.
I had this particular phrase on a loop and forgot about it.
What phrase was this?
It's a phrase that occurs at the beginning of the CD, in which I say, "The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible." Now, I had sometimes behave so strangely looped. The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely. Just those few words. Sometimes behave so strangely. And forgot about it. Sometimes behave so strangely.
So here's what happened. Diana leaves her studio. She closes the door, goes into the kitchen to make some tea. All the while, this loop is whirring away in the background. As she's sipping her tea, she thinks, is someone singing? Who's singing?
I heard what sounded like song in the background.
She realized, wait a second. That's not singing, that's me. Talking.
That very phrase.
Strangely.
But at this point,
Sometimes behave so
it
strangely.
appeared to be sung rather than spoken.
Sometimes behave so strangely.
This is
Sometimes behave so strangely.
right? Yeah. You still hear the words, but they're sung words rather than spoken words.
It's weird, like it just switches at a certain point. 3 or 4 repetitions in.
Right.
It's going, and then pow! It becomes music. And then now none of us can get it out of our head. Like the whole office is like, sometimes behave so strangely.
Sometimes behave so strangely. And you know what? If you do this demo and then you go back to the original sentence, it sounds like, speech to begin with. And when you come to that very phrase, I seem to be bursting into song.
The sounds as they appear to you are not only different from those that are really present, but they sometimes behave so strangely as to seem quite impossible.
I have to say this can continue for months and months. It's sort of like your brain gets altered for that particular phrase, and it continues to sound like singing for a very, very long time.
Alright, so here we have just one small indication that music is, well, it behaves very strangely.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. Just sort of humorous look at the link between speech and music. Let's move on to the actual building blocks of music. I'm just going to move quite quickly through these. Listen to this. And here it is again. Okay, now the point there is that melody is really just a pattern of notes at different intervals, but what's remarkable about the human brain is that it can instantaneously tell that those two patterns are the same even though they started on different pitches. Something apparently which other animals are not able to do. If we continue with melody, we can even construct a melody with one note. That might sound boring, but listen to this. So that's kind of like a rhythmic melody, but now when we add harmony, which is sort of layering different sounds, usually in chord sequences underneath that, it starts to build up. And now if we add rhythm to that, now that simple melody is really coming alive, and then if we add a final layer of semantic meaning over it, playing on that idea that the note is just, the melody is one note, we get this.
This is just a little samba built upon one single note. Other notes are bound to follow, but the root is still this note. Now this new one is the consequence of the ones we've just been through, as I'm bound to be the unavoidable consequence of you.
So that was Al Jarreau singing Jobim's wonderful tune, One Note Samba. Music exists in nature too, and I really want to link the rhythm aspect here, because everything in the universe from a cellular level to a cosmic level is governed by rhythms, and humans are uniquely able to create and follow musical rhythms, and human brains entrain rhythm. The Beatles producer George Martin actually interviewed a musicologist, and I just want to play you this clip because this is really interesting.
I've got something that's really special. Listen to this.
That's a neat rhythm. Is it some guy in the forest tapping away something?
It's a tree.
How do you mean it's a tree?
Okay, so what Bernie Krause does, he put a whole lot of tiny microphones in the stem of a tree and then recorded their cells swelling up with water and bursting, some of them, and condensed the time, and it actually led to a pattern which sounds remarkably like somebody playing a percussion instrument. Okay. Very quickly, I want to go through these slides in 2 minutes. I'm not going to dwell on these. I just want to make the point that we have a good neuroscience understanding of how the brain processes music. And if we look at on the left-hand side, we understand where pitch is processed, and we can ask questions. What happens when there's abnormalities of pitch perception or auditory perception of pitch? And at the bottom, when we have a remarkable ability to distinguish pitch, which is the rare absolute pitch which some people have. 2009, Daniel Levitin, who was a pioneer in the neuroscience of music, produced this image in an article which really is quite elementary in the sense that we've got the auditory cortex, the sensory motor cortex, the cerebellum visual cortex, all things we would expect to be associated with processing music. Similar picture in 2011 which includes the outer ear and the inner ear. Fast forward to 2025, and now we have quite a sophisticated knowledge of which parts of the brain actually analyze different parts of music, as we've looked at melody, harmony, and rhythm. And my favorite from 2021, which shows all of that together with a new understanding of how oxytocin, or the social connecting hormone, cortisone associated with stress, and the reward pathway with the neurotransmitter dopamine are all implicated in processing and listening and making music. The value of this precise understanding of auditory processing of sound, and music specifically, means that music therapists like Emma can target interventions which look at motor system, affective and motivational systems, cognitive system, and other sensory systems. And I'm going to hand over to Emma now to talk about music as therapy, now that we understand what music actually is. But I just want to end with a quote by Stephen Nachmanovich, who's a very well-known musical improviser and educator. And he says, in real medicine, medicine meaning any kind of therapeutic activity, you view the person as unique. In a sense, you drop your training. You are immersed in the case itself, letting your view of it develop in context. You certainly use your training. You refer to it, understand it, ground yourself in it, but you don't allow your training to blind you to the actual person who's sitting in front of you. In this way, you move beyond competence to presence. To do anything artistically, you have to acquire technique, but you create through your technique and not with it. And he's talking as a musician, but also as a therapist, and linking working with technique, perfecting technique, and moving beyond it and through it. Related to that, here's an article which I'd all encourage you to read, Jazz and the Art of Medicine, Improvisation in the Medical Encounter. And at the bottom, Paul Hader talks about, related to Makhmanovich's ideas, creating space, developing voice, and cultivating ensemble as being areas of overlap between musical performance and therapeutic intervention. And similarly, music lessons, what musicians can teach doctors and other health professionals, is a good read, and also looks at those kind of ideas. So, Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. So Mark has laid a lovely foundation of what music is, and you probably can already begin to think about how it can be used as a tool in therapy. But before I go there, I can't talk about music therapy without explaining my relationship to music and to music therapy. So I began violin lessons at the age of 3 and piano at 4. So I don't remember a time when music wasn't a part of my life. But for a long time, music was structured and compulsory and performance driven. I received recognition, but rarely experienced it as freedom. But alongside that, I had another relationship to music, the music I chose. And it became a space for identity and expression, listening to the music that I chose. But when I began training in music therapy, these two relationships met. So it became a profound way of healing myself through music, healing my relationship to music, and healing others through music. During this time, I also did an MBSR course, and it became increasingly clear to me that music and mindfulness were not separate paths, but they were deeply intertwined. So, then, since I studied music therapy, I've since worked in psychiatric care, special needs, dementia support, substance use recovery, corporate wellness, and I've also started running music therapy groups at an NGO in Kew called Ububele. So, music therapy is an evidence-based clinical practice in which a trained therapist uses music intentionally to support psychological, emotional, cognitive, and physical well-being. You can only register with the HPCSA as a music therapist once you do the master's training that is only available at UP, at Tux. It's a 2-year full-time degree, and it has 1,000 hours of supervised clinical internship. It was established in 1999, and they have recently introduced a PhD in music therapy. So, music therapy is used in medical settings, in pain management, oncology support, palliative care, neonatal intensive care units, and pediatric wards. It's used widely in neurological rehabilitation, in stroke recovery, Parkinson's disease, and traumatic brain injuries. In mental health, it's used to support as an adjunctive care for anxiety and depression, trauma support, substance recovery, um, and psychosis and schizophrenia. Um, I just wanted to share that when I worked at Tara Psychiatric Hospital during my training, I saw the profound power of music and drumming together on negative symptoms in schizophrenia, where I could see negative symptoms shift within an hour of everybody playing and drumming together and improvising together. It's used in developmental and educational contexts, especially in autism spectrum disorder, learning disabilities. Um, it's used for emotional regulation in children with behavioral difficulties. And like I mentioned, dementia care. And in dementia, it's particularly powerful for memory support, agitation reduction, and identity preservation. So, what do we actually do is a question I get a lot. So, there are two main types of music therapy: receptive and active, and creative work um, is throughout those two types. So, receptive methods include guided music listening, music assisted relaxation, also lyric analysis and discussion, which is particularly helpful with teenagers. Active methods include instrument playing, vocal work, improvisation, structured musical exercises, and is basically emotional expression without words. Creative work includes songwriting, composition, and reworking meaningful songs. And then there's also a component where we use movement, so rhythm based exercises, gait training, and music supported movement. So much like psychology, there are different theoretical orientations, um, and these aren't all of them, but these are the main ones. And I hope to add mindfulness-based music therapy. But so psychodynamic music therapy explores unconscious material, uses improvisation for symbolic expression, and the focus is on the relational process. Then there's humanistic or person centered, influenced by Carl Rogers, where the emphasis is on self expression, client led musical exploration. Cognitive behavioral, or also known as outcomes based, is structured musical exercises with goal oriented interventions. Um, then there's neurologic music therapy, which is based on standardized and research-based protocols. The focus is on motor, speech, and cognitive rehabilitation. And then community music therapy, which is particularly relevant in South Africa. It just takes in the social and cultural context. It's not about imposing your music on the context that you enter, and it includes a lot of group-based practice, and it becomes about identity and inclusion. So, as Mark has mentioned about music and the brain, more areas of the brain are activated while listening to music simultaneously than with almost any other human activity. Patients with severe non-fluent aphasia can recover functional speech years after a stroke through singing-based therapy. Brain scans demonstrate that singing can recruit right hemisphere regions to compensate for damaged left hemisphere language areas. Rhythmic auditory stimulation has been shown to improve gait speed by up to 25% and stride length by up to 12% in individuals with Parkinson's disease. In Alzheimer's, musical memory is often preserved even when verbal memory is severely impaired. So it becomes a really powerful way to communicate and connect to people with Alzheimer's, even when they've lost their speech. My work, so while music therapy has powerful neurological applications, like I've mentioned, my focus is on the emotional and the relational. Music is inherently relational. So your inability to take up space will be heard in how you sing. Your difficulties with boundaries will surface in musical indecision. Your dominance in social spaces will emerge in group playing. Your defenses will live in the silence between notes. Your avoidance will hide in repetition, and your fragmentation will split itself across instruments. So music becomes a powerful channel through which these parts of ourselves can be revealed, and with awareness transformed. And in a country where music is woven into mourning, celebration, storytelling, protest, and daily communication, music is not an add on to therapy. It is already embedded in the emotional language of the culture. Music becomes a culturally relevant, emotionally safe bridge, especially when verbal therapy can feel intimidating, stigmatized, or inaccessible. So my master's dissertation was based on it was a mindfulness based music therapy program that had been developed for people with breast cancer undergoing breast cancer treatment, and so I adapted it for adults recovering from eating disorders and substance use disorders in an inpatient setting. And my findings, I found that music functioned as an auditory anchor for present moment awareness, supporting focused attention and positively affecting negative mood states. Emotional regulation emerged as central, with participants reporting improved capacity to stay with and manage distressing emotions through non-judgmental musical exploration. And yeah, I just found that integrating mindfulness principles with music therapy created an experiential pathway for emotional access and regulation. So, music, not something to regulate your nervous system, but rather that's something that meets you exactly where you are, something that allows and accepts whatever your inner experience may be. It is not an external method of relaxation, although it can be. In this context and in a music therapy context, it is something that says, I see you, I understand you, and I can hold this experience. I also converted my dissertation into an ebook, and it is also informed by my clinical experience. So it has little practices and exercises along with my research findings woven in. I can put the link in the chat if people are interested in checking that out.
Thank you, Emma. I'm just going to talk quickly about why music and mindfulness. This really is where we are converging to with this talk. Emma and I are just keeping an eye on the time. Emma, do you think if we get through this in 10 minutes, we can do the listening with the participation? Yeah, okay, good. Right, so why mindfulness and music? I'm just going to touch upon a few areas which will be familiar to you as mindfulness practitioners, but linking them specifically to music. So embodiment is a good place to start, and a reminder that it's the full conscious of awareness of being in the body, and the understanding that emotional awareness and cognition have somatic components. This obviously is relevant for instrumentalists. I'm included dancers there, as people who express music, and singers. And just a little bit of thought will readily reveal that all of them, particularly instrumentalists, where there's a lot of fine motor control with the hands, wind instrument, horn players, etc., will also have a lot of lip and lung and chest involvement in playing music. So to a degree where I would argue that music performance is actually a form of athleticism, and where there's virtuosic music performance, it's high performance athleticism. of interest and related to this is repetitive strain injuries are common in musicians, particularly in the hands, but also singers can experience vocal dystonias and that sort of thing. Musical performance anxiety, which I've touched upon, is commonly felt somatically. So a pianist who's got sweaty hands and who's tremulous before a performance, that's obviously going to interfere with their ability to play. So embodiment is a very central part of music. Engaging the senses, another core aspect of mindfulness, is very obvious again in music, and the sense that's most apparently be involved in this is hearing, but also seeing your fellow musicians, seeing the audience, seeing what you are doing while you're playing, reading the music in front of you, and so on. Touch, obviously, very important. Vibration, and I can give you a personal example of this. I have a digital piano and an acoustic piano, and for years when I was traveling and took it not as engaged with music as I am now, I played digital piano, and it was remarkable to come back to an acoustic piano and to realize how much information I was missing through the strings and the wood, the body of the instrument actually vibrating, and how much information you get from that. And if anybody's interested in exploring this, there's an amazing story of award-winning Scottish percussionist Evelyn Glennie is profoundly hearing impaired, but she's taught herself to be a master percussionist through vibration, which is quite remarkable, and she's written a very inspiring essay on that in the link below. Interoception again, particularly with monitoring internal anxiety states. Musical anesthesia is an interesting one, and I put this in just because it's interesting. This refers to the ability to see music or hear music in other modalities, like most commonly seeing it. So seeing music, different timbres as colors, seeing images associated with music, or just hearing the music as a vision, as something visual. Duke Ellington, the jazz musician, and the classical composers Franz Liszt and Jean Sibelius were well known for describing their experience of music synesthesia. Sense foraging is quite an interesting new topic in mindfulness. Norm Farb and Zindel Siegel are writing about it. If Matthew Watkins in the audience, then it would be nice if he could say something about this. In fact, we were chatting in the week in a course that he's running on it, where the text sort of specifically identifying textures, timbres, melodies, instruments, and rhythms within a piece of music qualifies as sense foraging. Emotion and cognition, moving on. Music is often evocative and always conveys emotion, and as a performer, one has to stay with that emotion. If you're playing in a symphony orchestra and one movement of a symphony is very uplifting and the next is very sad, you have to stay with those emotions. Cognition includes, for a performer, an understanding of quite complex musical forms and structures when playing a piece, but also the self-monitoring and often critical cognitions which arise during performance. Did I lose everybody for a second? Did I lose everybody for a second?
Yes, but we're all back.
Okay. Did you get my bit about relationality? Yeah, okay. Then moving on. Okay. And this really is probably the most important slide in the talk. If mindfulness is training attention, then music can be the object of attention. Mindfulness is the cultivation of awareness, and music can be one of its most powerful objects, in the same way that breath or sound can be objects, but music as an entity, because it engages attention, emotion, memory, and embodiment simultaneously. The practice is not in the sound itself, but in how we relate to it. And finally, what a music and mindfulness course might look like. And here, really, there's so much that could be said. And I've just taken some sort of a potpourri of ideas, and this is the kind of thing we'd like to get feedback on and bounce around with the audience. Emma and I have been saying that there might be two possible mindfulness interventions, one for music lovers who want to use music as an object for meditation or mindfulness, and another for performing musicians, which would be more technical and in-depth with a quite. But either one would have to be a modified MBSR lasting at least several weeks, and there'd need to be fidelity between thought that because musicians are so used to, for years and years, to practicing music, then actually practicing mindfulness might be quite appealing to them, or won't feel as onerous to them as people who are not used to some sort of regular practice of something in their lives. Listening practices, sound as an anchor, as we've explored. Suspending judgment while listening to music one does not like, that's an interesting one. Music for self-kindness and compassion. And I see that there are body scans with music all over the internet, but I don't have any experience or thoughts about that. It would be nice to hear what people think. An obvious area of convergence would be linking musical rhythms with rhythms of awareness of breath and mindful movement. And one of my favorite things that I like thinking about is finding the still center point within rhythm. And what I mean by that is, if you look on the left, there's a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, a sort of a waltz pattern, which will be displayed linearly in a musical staff from page to page, and there's a start point and an end point. But another way of thinking about this in a more immersive sort of way, a more grounded, immersive, integrated way, is to see oneself as being at the center of the rhythm, and the rhythm sort of revolves around you rather than moving in front of you. And then finally, bringing attitudinal qualities to music, beginner's mind. I love this one, and I do it myself. I mean, every musician plays scales hundreds of thousands of times in their lives, and how do you bring beginner's mind to that so that it feels refreshing and interesting every time you do it? Patience, essential in music. You know, musicians can spend weeks, months, even years learning difficult pieces of music. Non-judgment, we've touched upon. And the always paradoxical issues around acceptance, letting go, and non-striving. Can one bring those to the practice of music and the experience of music, at the same time trusting in the process, and importantly bringing self-kindness and compassion when anxiety and criticism from oneself arises? Okay, so we've got 35 minutes left. I just want to end this section with saying that there are very few studies, interestingly, very little in the literature on what to Emma and I seem to be a very obvious link between mindfulness and music. One well-known study from 2020 from Leeds University looked at exactly that. They developed an 8-week course. They don't say in the article how they modified it, but I'm sure one could get that from the authors. And the results were quite interesting. Bear in mind that these are all qualitative results, but yeah, sorry, I can't read this because the first some images in front of it, but you can read the first line for yourself. More aware of something in instrumental lessons, were less self-critical, developed increased body awareness. We've touched on those things. described enhanced teacher-pupil communication. In instrumental practice sessions, participants reported more efficient, effective, and creative practice, and that they dealt with problems more effectively. They described enhanced listening skills and improved socio-collaboration in ensemble rehearsals, reported that mindfulness strategies had positive effects on music performance anxiety, which is interesting, and described changes in time perception, enhanced expressivity, and positive post-performance effects. Emma, any comments on that? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to add that when I did my dissertation and I was looking for research on this, the paper that I mentioned earlier, that was an adapted MBSR course, but with music integrated, that was one of, I think that may have been the first, and there still has not been much. I didn't even know that this paper had existed before we started chatting as well. So yeah, it is very shocking to me that there's so little research on this topic.
Okay, thank you. I think we're moving on to, yes, the actual listening exercise now. So, Emma, do you want to say something about that before I start playing it?
Yes. So we're going to start with a brief meditation, and then we're going to go into an explorative music listening experience. So just allowing your eyes to close if that feels comfortable, or softening your gaze. Taking a deep belly breath in through your nose, holding, and a slow exhale through your mouth. One more deep belly breath in through your nose. And a slow exhale. Just letting your natural breathing pattern return. And finding a point in your breath cycle that is most apparent to you, or is most comfortable to lean your attention on. Could be the air entering your nostrils, the rising and falling of your chest, This is the part where you expect me to say that if a thought arises, gently bring your attention to the present. Instead, I want you to watch these thoughts and bring a little bit of an analysis to them. Perhaps this can be about thoughts that you have regularly or throughout this talk. You can notice that there is a part of the mind that narrates, comments on what is happening, plans what comes next. It evaluates, judges, rehearses. It tries to solve. It tries to protect. And then see if you can also sense another part of you, a part that is aware that the thinking is happening. A part that can say, oh, that is planning. Or, oh, that is worry. does not argue with thoughts, it notices them. Beginning to notice that the mind is not one solid voice, but it is many. Different thoughts carrying different tones. Some feel urgent, almost loud. Some are critical or sharp. Some are calm and steady. You might even notice that they have different textures or speeds. But rather than trying to organize them, silence them, or decide which one is right, see if you can simply allow them to exist. Multiple voices and one awareness holding them. So I'm going to play a piece of music now, and you can keep your eyes closed if they are closed. And I'd like you to imagine each instrument, the saxophone and the piano, as a different thought process or inner voice. No need to analyze, just notice tone, pace, dominance, and emotional quality. The music will begin shortly. So I'm going to play this piece again, and I invite you to try resting your attention only on the piano for a while, and then shifting and resting only on the saxophone, and then gently widening your attention to include both at once. So you can slowly start wiggling your fingers and your toes and gently opening your eyes. And we are going to break everybody up into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes, where we are going to ask 3 questions that I'm going to put in the chat. You don't have to stick to these questions, it can be general discussion as well. Maybe you want to copy them so that when you go into your breakout rooms, you don't lose this text. But yeah, we'll see you in about 10 minutes.
Oh, we're back. Oh no,
I
the
know, sorry.
session's over.
We said
Mm.
10 minutes and then changed it to 5 minutes because we thought 10 minutes
Yes.
would be too long.
Oh
Oh.
no, we've barely begun.
Better go back. We're in the middle.
Well, we'll continue chatting about this little experience in with everybody, and then we'll move to a more general discussion. But does anybody want to start sharing or finish a conversation that you were having? But we'll all be watching this time.
Well, what stands, can I say something? Yeah, I don't know.
Yes?
Yeah, I was with, oh, I forgot her name. Koila, I think. Yes, I remember. Yes, and I remember, and what stands out for me is how our history is able to help us. How can I say? It filters. It's like a filter. It determines the way we relate to the music and the way we present to it.
Yes.
Because, for example, when I listen to Spanish music, I just want to jump out and start dancing. I mean, I just love rhythm, but I'm not a composer, I'm not a musician. So somebody else that studies music, or like Koila said, she works with sound and so on. So you relate. So it's interesting, how we position ourselves when we presencing. That stood out for me. History is very important, maybe because this is how our brain, our pathways are determining what stands out and
Yes.
kind of what's in the background. And now with therapy, you say, listen to what's in the background too. And there's so many sounds I didn't hear, and she was hearing so many. And I'm like, oh, you heard that and that and that. It's interesting. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. I think what you're pointing to is the way that we view things or experience things is so shaped by our experiences, and I think that's true for everything. And music is just magnifies that. So one song for one person based on their experience could be really triggering, and a song for somebody else could be really calming. And that's why in music therapy, we never say, here's a playlist for you to listen to. It's always about finding the music of the individual that's in front of you. Thank you, Nord. Anybody else? Rebecca.
I think listening to music mindfully is a really interesting experience in preferences and grappling with our preferences, because I think we're so conditioned to be thinking, oh, I like that, I don't like that, I'm not gonna focus on that, I'm not gonna allow that, I'm gonna just be with what I like. So that challenge of being with things as they are, I think music provides such a beautiful opportunity for that, because we're so conditioned with our preferences. So it's a very experiential practice in that, which I think is fascinating.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, and that's why we've thought about, as Mark mentioned, a practice in listening to a piece of music that you don't like and tolerating those uncomfortable feelings that it brings up. And obviously, music is really powerful, and we would never want to say, listen to the song, and no matter how distressed you get, listen to the song. But I guess that's not what you're doing in mindfulness either. But yeah, thank you. Mark, do you want to add?
No, thank you for those very insightful comments. Would be nice to hear more about that, but I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and I know we'd like to finish at 9 sharp. So is it okay, Emma, if we just open up to a general discussion about people's experience of the evening, and any questions and any suggestions and any ideas that have emerged from it for you?
I think I saw Miriam had her hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
And then
Go for it.
No, this just
follows on. Yeah, Hannah Laura and I were just getting started actually in the breakout room, but we both landed on we both had a similar thought that we wanted to ask. Singing bowls. Have either of you worked with singing bowls? Going straight to the sound. They're not exactly music, but they're very musical, and they're very powerful in terms of being a healing, in terms of their healing influence on people. And just wondered whether you had tried them, listened to them, experienced them.
Not me, but maybe Emma, that's something you get introduced to in music therapy. I don't know.
So I've been introduced to them in just my own yoga practice. So I have listened to them, but that kind of falls under sound healing, which especially or at least in my training, we don't touch at all on sound healing, and it seems to be that it's a separate kind of thing. The closest thing that I can think in music therapy that would relate to sound healing is neurologic music therapy, where very specific frequencies and rhythms and very specific sounds are played in terms of brain rehabilitation. But as far as I know, sound healing, it wasn't a part of my training, and I don't know if it falls under music therapy as a field, but I love it. I think it's amazing. And it would definitely, terms of a mindfulness based approach to music therapy, I think focusing in on a single tone, or if you're playing a couple of bowls at once and listening to the different bowls, I think could really apply here.
Thank you. Any other points of discussion? And if there aren't any, can I ask something? Matt, any comments on sense foraging?
Is someone talking? Thanks, Mark. I mean, I don't want to say too much except to say that, I mean, the difference, and I brought it out in the discussion, is I mean, do we need the term sense foraging to talk about a kind of curiosity to become surprised, to orientate attention into sound and to go into, I think, what you described would be, approximating sense foraging, because you're actually engaging with interest to particular elements of the music, which I did when I was going in, under Emma's instruction to explore the sound of the saxophone or the piano. But then when I stepped back and just sat in the open awareness that we would call mindfulness, I had a much more embodied experience, actually. So to me, if you want to differentiate those two, that was really how it came out. And I was just, as I listened through to this excellent talk, it really brought home how important music could be as a vehicle to actually demonstrate the difference between the concepts of sense foraging and mindfulness, and also Vedana, the tones and our experience of liking and disliking. I just think it's such a powerful. Sorry, I'm saying more than one thing here, but I'm also just really impressed with music as a vehicle for expanding and understanding these concepts and practices. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
So Ian had his hand up as well.
Thanks so much. I want to applaud the presenters for this intervention. I'm thinking of it almost as an intervention. I'm a social worker working in palliative care and with geriatric patients, and so the amount of dementia, vascular dementia, and others that appears is quite significant in an aging population. And this just feels like such a wonderful addition, because people still have awareness, still have insight, but with this tool of music as a form of connecting, both with feelings and relationships. I think it, yeah, I just see and feel and think of amazing things.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you very much.
Can I just respond to Ian or just add on?
Mm.
I work in dementia care, but a story that my lecturer told me, and I'll try and tell it in under 30 seconds. But she was told by someone who runs a dementia facility to come see their music therapy or what music that they were using. And they had a TV screen where they listened to music in this tiny little speaker, and that was that was the music therapy. And my lecturer went and she said, I want to do music therapy sessions. And she pointed to a man who was in a wheelchair and he had completely lost speech and he didn't make any eye contact with anybody. And she said, I want to work with him. And the facility manager said, no, 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 don't work with him. You're not going to get anywhere. And she said, that's exactly who I want to work with. And she worked with him for months and months and months, and he would fall asleep in the sessions, but she would continue on. And eventually, she had a conversation with his family, and they had told her that he loved Simon and Garfunkel. So one day, she sang The Boxer, and he lifted his head and made eye contact with her and started whistling along with her singing. And we watched a video of this and it was incredible. So yeah, it becomes this powerful way to say that I still see that there's a human here with value. And yeah, because I think people get very dehumanized in late stage dementia. Claire.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to reiterate what an interesting presentation it's been. One of the things that I'm curious about because I'm a physiotherapist and I often work with older people and think that it would be great to use music for rhythm and get them going and get them doing things a bit faster and for fun and things like that. And the problem is that I've never been able to do it because they all have hearing issues. And I just was curious about how you view that. I mean, particularly with dementia, people with dementia, they may have hearing things. And my husband recently, in the last 3 years, has developed significant hearing issues where music is extremely challenging, and he can't hear the rich. I mean, he is a musician, not by profession, but amateur, but he can't hear the richness of the music, and it's really, really hard. Do you work with people like that? And just what are your comments really around using music in those instances?
Thank you for your question. So during my training, I was placed at a special needs school, and in some of the groups that I had, there were children who were completely deaf or had partial hearing loss, and the sessions were, I mean, I can't say the same, but they would put their hands on the speaker and feel the vibrations, or put their hands on my guitar when I played and feel the vibrations, and the smile that would come onto their face was evidence that this was accessing them as well. And I think, yeah, I think feeling for a more practical kind of solution, I think rhythm, like drum beats and lower frequencies, are going to be more helpful. I can't say that he'll be able to really hear the richness. It'll probably be the bass notes or the lower frequencies of sounds. And in the dementia work that I do a group, and we all play the drums together. And I think even if they can't hear my singing or the guitar, everybody can see each other playing rhythm, or they can feel the rhythm in the room. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think obviously hearing is a huge part of music, but there's also feeling.
Thank you, everybody. Janine, do we need to wrap it up now?
Just to love on behalf of everybody, I see Michael saying that was so fantastic. I completely agree, Michael. When we had the breakout rooms, I was just so excited to speak to Mark and Emma. And as we were reflecting, is that music is the first thing we hear in the womb with our mother's heartbeat. And in palliative care, we know that sound and music is the last thing that we hear. And it's such an essential part of being human and being alive. And I also don't know why we haven't included it more richly in the mindfulness curriculum and in the way in which we present mindfulness. And so really thank you so much, Mark and Emma, for reminding us of this. And we're really looking forward to seeing ways in which you're going to explore this more. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for attending, and to Misa for giving us this opportunity to present. We've enjoyed it and look forward to maybe part 2 in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.